how my ex-wife manipulated me even after 10 years of divorce. What happened destroyed my life. Listen to this story until the end to learn the truth and never repeat my mistakes. My name is Daniel. 10 years ago, my beloved wife, Alice, left me, saying she was tired of our constant arguments. At the time, she assured me that she needed time to figure things out, but I could never shake the feeling that this wasn't the whole truth. There was no peace in our marriage, that's true, but I loved her more than anything. She was my world, my only love. She disappeared from my life without any explanation. The day I came home from work, her things were already gone. There was only a short note on the kitchen table: "Don't look for me. I can't live like this anymore." Sorry, those words burned my soul, leaving only emptiness and pain. I searched for her, asked friends, tried to contact her family, but it was all in vain. She had simply vanished into thin air. Years passed. I tried to rebuild my life, but nothing could replace Alice. I began to hate myself for not being able to keep her, but deep down, I always felt that something was off. That I didn't know the whole truth. Eventually, I came to terms with it, even started new relationships, but they felt more like an attempt to fill the void, not to find new love. One day, after coming home from a regular workday, I received a message. The number was unknown. The message consisted of just one line. "Aren't you curious why Alice left you?" I froze, feeling a tightness in my throat. Who was this? A joke? Someone who knew about my past? I tried calling the number, but it was unavailable. For days, I tried to ignore it, but every time I replayed that line in my head, the familiar pain returned. Finally, after a week, I received another message. "If you want to know the truth, come to the old place on Thursday at 8 p.m. I knew exactly what place they meant. It was our old bar, where Alice and I used to meet every Thursday after work. I tried to convince myself not to go. But when the day came, my feet carried me there on their own. The bar had barely changed. The same red sofas, dim lighting, and the scent of coffee mixed with alcohol. I took the corner booth, just like Alice and I always did, and ordered our favorite wine. I didn't have to wait long. The door opened, and a woman stepped in. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Alice. She looked different, her hair was shorter, and there was a coldness in her eyes. She walked over to my table and sat down across from me. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just looking at each other. "Hello, Daniel," she finally said, and I heard a slight tremor in her voice. "I knew you would come." "Why?" The words escaped my lips. "Why did you leave?" I couldn't tell you the truth back then." She looked away, and I felt my whole body tense up. "But now you deserve to know." She carefully pulled out an old album from her bag. I remembered it. It was our wedding album, which she had taken with her. Alice opened it and showed me one of the photos of us together, happy, smiling. "Everything was different back then," she said quietly, as if talking to herself. "But 6 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant." I couldn't believe my ears. Pregnant? We never planned to have kids, but I had always dreamed of it. And she left without telling me? "You." I could barely form the words. "We had a son," she finished. "But he died before he was born." My heart stopped. "A son? We could have had a son?" I felt the walls I had built over the years crumble. It was too much. I couldn't believe it. Alice looked at me, and I saw genuine pain in her eyes. "I couldn't tell you back then," her voice trembled. "I was shattered. I didn't want you to see me like that. So I just left. But now I realize I hurt you even more." We sat in silence. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't allow myself to cry. "Why didn't you come back?" I finally asked. "Because I was afraid you would hate me," she sighed softly. "And there's one more thing. Daniel, he wasn't your son. My head spun. Not mine? What did that mean? She looked at me again, and I saw something new in her eyes: guilt. I was seeing another man before we got married, she quietly confessed. I was pregnant before we even got married. And when I found out he had died, I just couldn't continue living with that lie. Everything around me became blurry. I sat there, unable to process what she was saying. Alice, my Alice, had been hiding this terrible truth from me all these years. I had been trapped in her lie without even knowing it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I did everything wrong." I didn't respond. I just felt empty. I didn't know what was worse, that she had left or that she had hidden the truth from me for so long. Alice quietly stood up and walked out of the bar. I was left alone. More broken than I had been before learning the truth. Alice left the bar, leaving me alone with a flood of questions. One thought kept swirling in my head: why did she decide to tell me now? Everything I knew about her had been a lie. She had left, hiding the most important part of our life, and I was convinced that after this encounter, I would never see her again. However, a few days passed, and once again, I received a message. This time, it was short. "We need to talk. It's important." At that moment, I didn't know what to do: ignore her or give her a chance to explain further. My emotions swung between anger and sympathy. In the end, I agreed to meet at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Alice arrived again, but this time she looked even more exhausted. "You had the right to know," she began, barely making eye contact. I couldn't keep living with that secret. Secret? I could barely contain my anger. "You decided to destroy me completely by telling me that our entire marriage was built on lies?" "No, I wanted you to hear it from me," her voice trembled. "But there's more." I felt something tighten inside me. What more could she say? I was already close to breaking. "The man, the father of my child," she paused, taking a deep breath. "He's come back." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "He returned to town a few months ago. He started looking for me, and it seems he wants to resume our relationship." My head was spinning. What was she trying to say? What was I supposed to do with this information? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because I want you to know that I didn't leave you for him. I left because I was afraid you would never forgive me if the truth came out. And now, he wants to bring everything back. I just didn't know who else to turn to." I looked at her, not knowing how to respond. She had always been this way, trying to manipulate my feelings, to stir up sympathy where there was nothing left but pain. But now, looking at her, I only saw a scared woman trying to run from her past once again. "And what do you expect me to do?" I asked harshly. "How am I supposed to help you?" "You know him, Daniel," she whispered. "He was your friend before we got married." I froze. It was impossible. My friend? I mentally went through all our mutual acquaintances, all the friends I had back then. Could it be someone I trusted? "Mark," she said, as if reading my thoughts. My head spun. Mark. He had been my best friend. We met in university and went through a lot together. Then suddenly, he disappeared from my life when Alice and I got married. I never understood why our paths diverged. He simply stopped answering my calls and vanished. And now, I was finding out he was part of all this? "He's the father of the child?" I asked, feeling my hands start to tremble. "Yes," Alice replied. "But back then, he didn't even know. I didn't tell him, just like I didn't tell you. After the child died, he left, and I was left alone with the burden. Now, he's back and trying to force his way into my life again. Mark, my best friend, the father of my wife's child." It sounded like a cruel joke. I sat across from her, not knowing how to respond. My head was spinning. This was so insane I couldn't believe it was real. "What do you want from me, Alice?" I asked, trying to hide the bitterness in my voice. Do you want me to go back to how things were? For me to forget everything? No, she whispered. I just want you to protect me. He's become very pushy. He follows me, comes to my house, threatens me. What? I jumped up. You said he wanted to get back together, and now you're saying he's threatening you? He's changed, Daniel, her voice trembled. He's not the Mark you knew anymore. He's become aggressive. I don't know what he's capable of doing next. I sat there, trying to process what I had just heard. Mark, my friend, my brother in life, had become a threat to the woman I once loved. It was too much. I wanted to find him, talk to him, figure things out. But what would that change? Alice and I were no longer together. I had no right to interfere in her life. What do you want me to do? I asked again. I want you to talk to him, she begged, grabbing my hand. He'll listen to you. You're the only person he still trusts. But I haven't seen him in over 10 years. I exclaimed. Why would he listen to me? Because you were his only real friend, she whispered. Even when he loved me, he couldn't bring himself to tell you. He left not because of me, but because of the guilt he felt towards you. He's afraid of you, Daniel. Those words hit hard. He left because of me? He had abandoned us out of guilt? And now, with his life in ruins, he had returned to destroy ours? I don't know what to do, I murmured. Just talk to him, she pleaded. I have no one else to turn to. And I agreed. I don't know why. Maybe out of compassion, maybe out of pity for myself. But I agreed to find Mark, this time not as a friend, but as a rival who had to settle the last conflict between us. I decided to meet with Mark. It wasn't easy. I got his contact through a mutual friend, and we arranged to meet at a small pub in the center of town. I sat at the table, going over all the possible scenarios in my head. Would he be aggressive? Would he try to justify himself? My emotions swung between anger and curiosity. The door opened, and Mark walked in. He didn't look anything like I remembered him. Back then, he had been a lively, energetic guy. Now, standing in front of me was a man with an empty look in his eyes, streaks of gray in his hair, and a thin, tired frame. His face was worn and his gaze cold, without the warmth of past friendship. Hello, Daniel, he said, sitting across from me. Long time no see. Yeah, I looked at him, trying to find any trace of the old Mark I knew. I don't even know where to start. You're here to talk about Alice, he said flatly, without waiting for me to answer. I sighed. He knew. He understood that our meeting would inevitably center around her. Mark, I began, trying to collect my thoughts. She came to see me. She told me about you. What's going on? Are you stalking her? He pressed his lips together and looked away. I'm not stalking her, he muttered quietly. I just want to bring everything back. Fix my mistakes. But you're acting like a madman. She says you've been threatening her. His eyes flashed with anger, and he turned his head sharply toward me. Threatening her? His voice rose. And how did she threaten me when she told me she'd never come back? When I found her, she said I was the past, that I was a mistake. I froze. His words hit me hard. Mark was desperate. His love had turned into obsession, and the pain of losing her had made him ruthless. This wasn't the Mark I knew. In front of me was a man who had destroyed his life over a woman. And now what? I asked calmly, trying to keep my composure. You think you can force her to come back? Force her to love you again? You don't understand, he hissed, leaning in closer. She took everything from me. My life, my hopes. I disappeared because of her. And now, when I'm back, she pretends like nothing happened. She wanted to throw me away like trash. You destroyed my life, Mark, I said, feeling something ignite inside me. You destroyed my marriage. You destroyed everything I believed in. And now you want to destroy her? He went silent, and I saw his expression change. There was something new in his eyes, a mix of anger and pain. I didn't want this, he murmured. I loved her even before you and I met. I tried to step back, but she chose you. I accepted that. But then she told me we were going to have a baby. And when I came back to find out what happened, she was with you. He paused, as if searching for the right words. I left everything because I didn't want to ruin your life. He stood up and looked me straight in the eye. And now, when I have nothing left, she wants to get rid of me again. Stop, Mark, I said firmly. If you keep going, you'll destroy all of us. We've already lost enough. Just walk away. Leave her alone. Give yourself a chance for a new life. A new life? He laughed bitterly. For who? For me? I lost everything because of her, and now you want me to just walk away? I stayed silent. His anger and despair frightened me. I didn't know what else to say. At that moment, I realized that I wouldn't be able to convince him. Mark, I whispered, standing up. I love her. I love her even after everything. And you'll never be able to make her love you again. Just accept it. His face froze. For a moment, I saw something like a glimmer of hope in his eyes, but then it faded. She's already made her choice, he said coldly. And so have I. He turned abruptly and walked out, leaving me alone in the pub. I sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Mark was on the edge. I didn't know if he would be able to stop. I had a sinking feeling that after our meeting, something terrible was bound to happen. Final. The next morning, Alice called me. He came, her voice was trembling. He came to my house. He threatened me, said if I didn't come back to him, he'd make me regret it. My heart started racing. What should I do? Where should I go? I was losing control of the situation again. But this time, I couldn't just sit and wait. I immediately called the police. Mark had tried to break into her house, but the arrival of the police stopped him. He was arrested, and they told me he wouldn't be able to come near Alice again. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw only one thing, his desire to destroy. In the end, Alice left town. She disappeared again, but this time, it was for good. I never heard from her again, nor from Mark. He vanished from my life, but his shadow would always follow me. That was the end of the story, but not the end of my pain. This is how my ex-wife manipulated me even after 10 years of divorce. This story taught me one thing: never sacrifice yourself for people who don't appreciate your life. If you have ever been in similar situations or have experienced manipulation from loved ones, feel free to share your stories in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to avoid missing new stories and advice on how to avoid such mistakes in the future. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We apologize for any mistakes. We are not native speakers, and we create these videos using artificial intelligence, but we are constantly working on improving the quality of our content. Your likes and comments help us get better. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with new videos. See you in the next story.